Thanks for the intro, Gal. So I'm Chris Coburn. I'm the Principal Tech Alliance Architect here at Recorded Future, and that's just a fancy title for the guy that makes sure that Recorded Future works well with every other security vendor in the world. And so for us, we believe that intelligence makes security tools smarter, right? So it's great that we have these phenomenal end products to help protect our organizations. But without intelligence, how strong is a SIM, a SOAR, a firewall, a vulnerability management platform, etc.? We think we can take these already great tools and make them phenomenal to really help solve the issues that every security team are kind of encountering. So when we say intelligence, what do we mean by intelligence? Well, cyber threat intelligence has been a kind of segment of the industry for a long time, but it's quite segmented, and every vendor does cyber threat intelligence quite differently. I'm sure you guys have all seen open source cyber threat intelligence. You may get cyber threat intelligence from an ISAC like the FS ISAC or the Auto ISAC. You may get intelligence from an endpoint vendor, right? Where they have billions of endpoints and things are happening to those endpoints and they collect that data and they make it available. And then there are boutique firms, that do very hardcore human-based research for human researchers. And then there's us, and we do it so different than everybody else. We almost sort of sit in a league of our own. And the way we do intelligence is we do mass collection. So what we do is we collect millions and millions of documents every second across the deep, open, and dark web. And we apply natural language processing. It's a little bit more complex than natural language processing, but we'll call it NLP. And ontology analysis and entity relationship mapping. And that generates a corpus of data we call the intelligence graph. So as you can imagine, it's a massive, we've been doing this since 2009, collecting all of this data. It's a massive, massive data set. You can imagine AWS as our infrastructure provider very much enjoy us as a customer because we do huge amount of analytics across a huge data set. And so what that ends up looking like is we have this understanding of the cyber world from the outside world, right? So we understand that, hey, there are these threat actors. These threat actors exploit these vulnerabilities with these file hashes that use these IP addresses as their C2 infrastructure, that use these domains as their phishing targets, whatever that may be, and all of the associations there, right? So it's great to understand that, hey, like I need to be concerned about APT29. Recorded Future can help tell you that, hey, APT29 exploits these vulnerabilities with these pieces of malware. And then we can tell you more about those pieces of malware. And then we can tell you how they're being deployed. And we can tell you the IP infrastructure that you need to block, right? So that level of context is what it's all about, right? We need to provide intelligence to each analyst so that they can, use that context to make decisions faster. So there's a lot of places that intelligence can exist in the world of cyber, right? So we sell our intelligence via these modules, and I'm not going to go into every module because only a few of the modules make a ton of sense here. Specifically vulnerability intelligence, which I'm going to dive into next slide into great depth. But the idea here is that we have one corpus of data, but we have so many use cases for that data. And you can see some of these use cases here. Are you very much concerned about improving the context in your SIM so that your level 1 SOC analyst can make decisions faster? Are you trying to do advanced threat research and understand what are the next 6 to 12 months of the cyber landscape for your company is? Are you concerned about your brand and your brand's image on the internet and the dark web and so on and so forth? Are you concerned about identity leakage and what that could impact your company? Or if you're sitting in this conference, I bet you're pretty concerned about vulnerabilities and which of these vulnerabilities are exploitable or not, right? And so let's talk about vulnerability intelligence, right? We're not trying to replace CVSS scoring or NPSS scoring or anything like that. We think those are super valuable, pieces of information when it comes to prioritizing which vulnerabilities you look at. So if you think of CVSS, you guys are all aware, it's sort of how malicious or how risky or how bad is this vulnerability to this specific host. And that's interesting. It's very, very interesting, but it's pretty narrow in its scope. Our vulnerability intelligence looks at CVEs. It is indexed on CVEs, though we do have pre-NVD data. What our intelligence is looking at is what is the likelihood of exploitation of that vulnerability. We look at vulnerabilities in a life cycle, from the point of it being, mentioned in NVD or mentioned by a vendor in some kind of way. So like the vulnerability being known, to proof of concept code being available, right? So some analyst or some threat actor even has shown that this vulnerability is exploitable and this is how it can be exploited, to the evidence of that exploit being possible, but with no pure evidence of it being exploited, right? So we hear chatter that there are pieces of malware exploiting a vulnerability, but we have no evidence. So that's sort of like the, exploit likely, but we're not 100% sure. It's a, hey, for sure, this vulnerability is being exploited, and here's, how it's being exploited and who's being exploited, etc., and who's using that vulnerability to exploit victims. So the idea here is that we are a point of reference that you can use to help prioritize those vulnerabilities, right? So if you have two vulnerabilities, one with a CVSS of 10, but recorded future saying, yeah, it's a risky vulnerability, but we haven't seen any threat actor or any mention of that vulnerability being exploited in a really long time, compared to maybe the CVSS 6 or 7, where we're saying, hey, we're seeing constant everyday exploitation of that vulnerability in the wild. In our head, probably you should fix that CVSS 6 or 6 or 7 with the recorded future risk score of 99, right? And so that's the idea what we do here. So what does that look like within Vulcan? So what we do is we take that data and push it into Vulcan and make that indexable so that you as an analyst can sit there and say, hey, of these vulnerabilities that Vulcan is managing for me, which are the ones that are higher risk from recorded futures perspective, so that I can use that as a lever to make a decision of which vulnerabilities I want to prioritize for patching. So again, we're not trying to replace anybody else's scoring. We think that you need to take every bit of data point that you can to make decisions, because there's no way we're ever going to fix every patch, right? Or patch every system and fix every vulnerability. But if recorded future can help you make a determination of which ones you should do a little bit earlier than the others, that's what it's all about. And that's what recorded future is trying to provide. And that's what our integration, our connector into Vulcan Cyber can do, right? It's about prioritizing. And then again, having that context, understanding that, hey, this vulnerability is being exploited by these pieces of malware, by these three threat actors, using these file hashes, IP addresses, domains, whatever that may be, so that you as an analyst can not only prioritize, but understand, have context of what that vulnerability is and why I should care. And so that's what I have to show you guys. If you have any questions, we do have a booth in this cyber conference, in the CyberRisk Summit. So please feel free to join. You can request a demo. You can look at a video. Feel free to contact me. My email is connected to that booth. If you can always add me to LinkedIn as well if you have any questions.